And it's a 1 hour video, and I'm going to go through it bit by bit and show you the speaking figure in the butterfly. And the video is created by Christian scientists, not Christian scientists, you know, the Church of Christian Science, Christian scientists, biologists, philosophers, etc. And we're going to pause and we're going to see the magnificence of the hiddenness of the divine will operating in his creative virtue in the butterfly, but hidden from the human eye. And only through photography in its most sophisticated form and the computer technology which will show you magnified the design of the Creator in forming this little creature. And Jesus tells us he gets a great burst of joy when his little children discover his hidden work and are able to praise him for it. Now, up until our era, we didn't have this technology to spy on these hidden acts of the Creator. And I sometimes suppose the timing of God, which is perfect, to introduce the celestial doctrine of the divine will has concurred with the greatest sophistication in technology, which has its origin in God. All technology, talk about the World Wide Web, you know, the eternal web of the Trinity has been operating for eternity. And all of these technologies and these inventions sometimes go acknowledged from their original origin, but they've all had their origin in what these scientists called intelligent design, which is a reference to God. So I'm going to also want to tell you today is a very special feast day for Louisa. September the 7th, 1889, at the age of 24, Louisa experiences her second nuptial in heaven, wherein Jesus takes possession of her heart. So, Father, at your Mass tomorrow, you might remember that.
1889.
Yes.
Yes, September the 7th.
September the 7th, 1889. She's already had her first nuptial on earth, right? She had her first nuptial on earth. It's described in volume 1. Her 4 nuptials are described in volume 1, and if I get time, we're going to go through some of these nuptials in my last talk on the tenderness of divine love.
The 89 is kind of significant.
Yes, well, I've sent that out of my email because 89 is particularly significant in my life, which I only discovered over the years. You know. And there's a butterfly that has the number 89 on it. Of the hundreds of butterflies created, there's only one butterfly that has the number, a number on it, it's 89. And my house address is 89, and the exit from the freeway to my valley is 89. And in 1989, In the Feast of St. Joseph, 1989, I wrote my first letter to Brother Andrew of Calcutta, asking him could he help me discern about the call I had to go to live at Joseph's place. That was 1989, which is 100 years since Louisa's nuptial. And then it just keeps popping up over and over and over. And I because I always take notice of dates and feasts and everything else, very significant, because Jesus says to Louisa, nothing, once you've given your fiat, every tiny little aspect of your life is significant, and he's overseeing everything. And nothing happens just as a mere coincidence. It's very important to understand that. Most people that are not living in this generative fiat, a lot of things that happen in their lives they think of as coincidental or, maybe a little bit magical or something, but they don't attribute it to God. So that's significant in the sense that we're talking about the butterfly today, and tomorrow we'll celebrate this great, great feast of Louisa's, the Lord taking possession of Louisa's heart. 10 years later, in 1899, Louisa takes possession of Jesus' heart. Now, this is very, very significant. These are the 4 progressions of the nuptials. And then 1899, and she receives the 3 divine breaths of the Trinity, so that the Trinity possesses her totally and entirely. 1899. It's in, I always put this introduction pretty much in all my books, and you can read it there when you go home if you've got any of my books. Some of them don't have it, but most of them do.
Do you have the month for 1899?
Yeah. On February the 28th, 1899, at the age of 33, Louisa begins to write in obedience and receives the invisible stigmata on November 14th, 1899. So there's several things that happen in 1899. She begins to write of her experiences in obedience. She's 33 years of age. Then she receives the invisible stigmata on November the 14th, 1899, which is when Michael will be receiving his surgery on his hands.
Oh. Pray for success.
On November the 16th, 1900, which is 1 year later, at the age of 35, Louisa experiences her 4th nuptial, wherein she takes possession of Jesus' heart. She receives 3 divine breaths and embarks on becoming centered in the divine will and possessing it entirely. Now, do you see she's 35? Do you see how long it's taken her to go through the various transitions and stages and fiat, until she reaches the stage where she's ready to take full possession of the Trinity and their will. So don't be disheartened if you feel like it's taking you a little longer to embrace the fullness of this celestial doctrine. So she's 35 when these 3 divine breaths and embarks on becoming centered in the divine will and possessing it entirely until she becomes the first soul stigmatized in the divine will. She is 54 years of age in volume 12 when Jesus reveals this to her. She's 54 at the time it's written. Now, I'm not sure that's the time it happened, but that's the time she wrote down that Jesus spoke this to her. And Jesus tells Louisa he wants to give her the office of his divinity. He wants to give her the office of his divinity. Now, if you're not collapsing by now, you should be, because be very aware that the office he gives Louisa, she wants to share and give to all her little children, just like Our Lady wants to share and give us her office, which is to incarnate Christ on earth, with being the first to do so. So this is very important for you to remember every day, that Jesus has chosen you to share with you in various degrees, because it all depends on your cooperation. Okay, the way you respond to the degree that you will embrace this. Okay, so that was not intended, but anyway, God intended it, didn't it?
That's what matters.
So, tomorrow, I think we should write down in our diaries these special feasts of Louisa.
Yes.
Even though she's not yet canonised in an official sense, basically some of the greatest saints in the church acknowledged her as a saint, Padre Pio being one, Pope Pius X being another, Saint Annibale de Francia being another, and several great saints, after meeting with Louisa, after reading her writings, acknowledged her sanctity as being, the most extraordinary that they had ever experienced. So I think we can feel quite safe in writing these feast days down and remembering them during the year in a divine will way, because in heaven, all of heaven is celebrating these days as a great liturgical feast in heaven. So we are in heaven, we're acknowledging them, and we're celebrating, especially tomorrow when Jesus takes possession of Louisa's heart. And yes, Father.
Could you give us the reference for when Jesus told her that at the age of 55? About
54, yes. She's that's in volume 12. Volume 12, March 14th, 1919.
Yes. March the 4th.
March 14th.
Oh, 14th.
And on March the 17th, 1921, which is still volume 12, Jesus tells Louisa he wants to give her the office of his divinity.
Okay, so this is March 17th, 1921. Jesus makes Louisa pass from the office which his humanity had upon earth to the office which his will had within his humanity. I was saying to my sweet Jesus, I don't know. The more you say you give to me by means of your holy volition, the more wretched and ugly I feel. I should feel better, more good. Instead, it's all the opposite. And Jesus told me, my daughter, the more the grain of my will grows in you, the more you will feel the misery of your straw. In fact, when the ear begins to form, grain and straw are one single thing. But when the life of the ear keeps forming, as the grain matures, the straw is detached from it and remains only as defense of the grain. Therefore, the more wretched you feel, the more the grain of my will keeps forming in you and is close to perfect maturation. The straw within you is nothing other than your weak nature, which, living together with the sanctity and the nobility of my will, feels its misery even more. Then he added, My beloved, up until now you have done before me the office which my humanity had upon earth. Now I want to change your office, giving you another one, more noble, more extensive. I want to give you the office which my will had within my humanity. See how much higher and more sublime this is. My humanity had a beginning. My will is eternal. My humanity is circumscribed and limited. My will has no limits and no boundaries. It is immense. A more noble and distinguished office I could not give you. On hearing this, I said, My sweet Jesus, I can find no reason why you want to give me such an office, nor have I done anything to deserve such a great favour. And Jesus said, The whole reason is my love, your littleness, your living in my arms like a baby who cares about nothing but her Jesus alone, and the fact that you have never refused me any sacrifice which I have asked of you. I do not let myself be impressed by great things, because in the things which appear to be great there is always something human, but by small things, small in appearance though great in themselves. And then you yourself should have understood that I was to give you a special mission in my will. That continuous speaking to you about my will, that making you understand its admirable effects, which I have done with no one until now, I behaved with you like a teacher who wants his disciple to become perfect, either in medicine, or in history, or in something else. It seems that he cannot speak about anything else. He keeps harping on that point. So I did with you. I assumed the attitude of teacher of divine will, as if I ignored all the rest. After I instructed you well, I manifested to you your mission and how the fulfillment of the fiat voluntas tua on earth will begin in you. Courage, my daughter. I see that you are losing heart. Do not fear. You will have all of my will as your help and support. And while he was saying this, he caressed my head, my face, and my heart with his hands, as though confirming what he was saying. Then he disappeared.
Beautiful. Thank you. So we can get into the topic today. That was beautiful, little sideline.
It's worth reflecting on, considering the feast tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Well, we could also have our intention that Jesus takes possession of our hearts.
Amen. Amen.
As he did with Louisa. Okay, from volume 35, October the 12th, 1937. Acts in the divine will are messengers between heaven and earth. How much artistry of love he holds in these acts. He hides himself in the acts of the creature in order to not make himself known. That's very, very strange. Sounds strange. But if you know anyone who's an artist, what they're expressing in their artistry, they want people to behold the expression that's hidden in there, whether it's painting, music, sculpture. And they want to take the focus of themselves as a human being and see the expression of their soul in their work of art. This is at a human level. Artists are like that. They prefer people to notice the beauty in the art form that's come out of their soul. So God is like that. It's a divine act that we imitate on earth. My little daughter of my volition, why do you fear? In my will there are no fears, but highest love, courage and firmness, and decision, one time, that is not moved any more. So much so that one who lives in him does not pray, but commands. And she herself is mistress and can take whatever she commands. I'm not going into that, but it's a very, very significant aspect of how we offer our prayers in the divine will. We command rather than pray. We put everything at her disposition. God is putting everything of himself, all of his acts, at our disposition. And this is because everything is sacred, everything is holy in her. Much more so that living in our volition, she will not want, nor will she take, nor will she command us if it is not what we want. Therefore, her commands please us. They make us rejoice, and we ourselves say to her, take, speak, say, what else do you want? Rather, how much more you take, so much more you will make us happy. Rather, when the creature wants our will, all her acts are like so many messengers between heaven and earth. They descend and climb continuously, making themselves now messages of peace, now of love, now of glory. And sometimes they arrive to command the divine justice to halt itself, which is what in the divine will you have the power to do. Well, Louisa did do it on several occasions, but in order not to obey Louisa, Jesus did not visit her, because he knew if he was in her presence and she begged him not to chastise, he would be forced to obey her when she lived in his will. So therefore he absents himself from her in order to chastise the people. How much good these messengers do. When we see them come before our throne, we recognize ourselves in these acts. So your acts used into the divine will, the Trinity recognizes themselves in these acts. That disguised by the human veils of the acts of creatures, they hide our will, but is always him. And being delighted in ourselves, we say, how much artistry of love he holds. He hides himself in the acts of the creature in order to not make himself known. But we know him just the same, and loving ourselves again, we let him do whatever he wants. Therefore, we call these acts our acts, and as such we recognize them, only that the creature has concourse with us, and with her acts has given them as attire in order to cover herself. Therefore, she is the knoll where my divine will can rest himself, and he is delighted to unfold his life, making unheard of prodigies, hiding himself in the creature as covering himself with her cast-offs. Even more than the creation, all creatures had origin from his fiat. They live, grow, and are conserved in him. He is actor and spectator of all their acts. She will complete her life in his fiat, and it will fly in heaven in one act, wanted by his volition. Hence everything is his, all rights are his, no one can escape him. The only difference is that one who lives in him has life together with him, knows him, is light of whatever he does, rejoices him with her company, forms her joy, and the confirmation, all that she wants my will done in her. Instead, one who doesn't live in him, doesn't know him, remains isolated and forms her continuous sorrow. After this he added with tenderness of inexpressible love, my blessed daughter, how beautiful it is to live in my volition. This creature keeps us always in festival. She knows nothing other than our will alone, and everything becomes for her will of God. The sorrow, is that what's the next part? Will of God. The sorrow, the divine will, the joy, her heartbeat, her breath, her movement become divine will. Her steps, her works, they feel the steps of my volition, and the sanctity of the works of my fear. The food that she takes, the sleep, the most natural things become for her will of God. Whatever she sees, feels and touches, she sees, feels and touches the palpitating life of my volition. My will holds her so occupied and invested by him that jealous he doesn't permit that even the air is not divine will. And as everything for her is our will, so for us. We feel her in all our divine being, in the heartbeat, in the movement. Neither do we know how to do anything, nor do we want to do anything without the one who lives in our volition. Our love is so much that we make her flow in all our works. So today you're going to find out how you flow in the works of the divine will in the butterfly. And you're flowing together in these works. And together with us she maintains and participates in our creative and conservative act, so that she stays together with us to do what we ourselves do and want whatever he wants from us. Neither can we put her aside, being one the will that we possess, one the love, one the act that we do. And it is proper that living in our volition we live together, always to do only one thing. It was this need that our love felt, to keep company with the creature, together to gladden ourselves, to hold her in our womb, in order to felicitate ourselves together. And since the creature is little, we want to give her our will, in order to have occasion in every act of giving her our life, our act, our ways, us through nature and her through grace. And this is our joy, the greatest glory for us. So does it seem little to you to give our being that the creature being little cannot contain? She gives it back to us again, together with herself, and we again return to give ourselves. It is one continuous giving of ourselves to each other. And this makes rise such love and glory that we feel as repaid by her for having given her love. Therefore, in each act, in each thing that she does that does not enter our will, it is a rent that we feel, a right that we feel taken away, a glory, a joy that we lose. Hence, be attentive and make sure that everything becomes for you divine will. Beyond this, to each act that the creature does in our divine volition, we duplicate our love towards her. In each act that the creature does in our divine volition, we duplicate our love towards her. Our love, as it invests her, carries with itself our sanctity, our goodness, our wisdom, so that she remains duplicated in sanctity, in goodness, in wisdom, in the knowledge of her Creator. And as we love her with duplicated love, thus she loves us with double love, with sanctity and duplicated goodness. Our love is operative, and as it departs from our Supreme Being, in order to love the creature with double love, thus it gives her grace to make her love us with love always growing, not to give anything less to an act so great done in our will proves impossible to us. These acts, we can say, are the enrapturers of our love. They enrapture our sanctity, and the ways are formed in order to know who we are and how much we love her. So let's begin, Michael.
As human beings, we are instinctively drawn toward the grandeur of the natural world, to spectacular displays that inspire us with their magnitude and power. During moments like these, we are understandably filled with a genuine sense of awe. Yet nature's most stunning revelations aren't always defined by sheer force or physical scale. For often, in secluded corners of our planet, many of Earth's greatest wonders take center stage. Wonders of rare beauty and complexity, creativity and design. Wonders born on the gossamer wings of an insect weighing less than an ounce.
As you watch a butterfly, to describe what you're looking at, you can't really put it into words. And I said to myself, I want to be part of that. That is the coolest thing. That's biology, it's also magic.
When you hold a living butterfly in your hand for the first time, maybe you've netted it or you picked it off a flower or something, and here's this incredibly beautiful organism, intricately shaped with its feet and antennae and all these things moving at once.
Every one of these 20,000 species have different color patterns, and every one of them has different shaped wings. The diversity is just so magnificent. If I was the greatest artist in the world, there was no way I could come up with all of these patterns. I mean, it would be just absolutely impossible.
If you open the work of a lepidopterist, someone who studies butterflies, somewhere in that writing, you're going to find the language of astonishment. The fact that it goes through a caterpillar stage and then becomes this mysterious chrysalis, out of which this flying creature emerges, has captured the imagination of people since antiquity.
Throughout history, butterflies have touched the human mind and soul on levels both scientific and philosophical. 3,500 years ago, Egyptian artists studied their anatomies and then rendered them as icons of beauty and perfection of form. In Aztec and Mayan folklore, the insects symbolized life and death. And to the ancient Greeks, Psyche, the word for butterfly, literally meant the soul. Today, terms like magical and miraculous are often used to describe their mysterious life cycles. For almost every butterfly, it is a cycle that begins, often hidden from the eyes of the world. Depending upon its species, a female butterfly can lay hundreds of eggs during her brief lifetime. Each initiates an extraordinary process of growth and transformation.
The eggs are remarkable in themselves. They have species-specific architectures, some of which are just astonishing. For instance, if you look at a monarch egg, it has a beautiful symmetrical structure. It looks like a little miniature dome or cathedral.
Ranging in size from a pinhead to the width of a child's fingernail, each egg is attached to a plant by an adhesive fluid secreted by the butterfly. They are lined with a coating of wax that helps keep them moist and viable. Each egg is deposited on a specific species of plant called a host. These host plants are the only source of food a butterfly's offspring will eat. So accurate identification of their leaves and branches is crucial, and the females are well equipped for the task.
The perception that they have of the odor of those plants is just overwhelming. So they can find those plants for miles, and then once it gets near its host plant, it can tell that the odor is getting stronger and stronger. Then it begins to focus on leaf shape. Instinctively, it knows what leaf shape its host plant has. And it begins to taste. And it tastes with its feet, with its forelegs. They drum the leaves, they scratch the leaves, and then they use their proboscis to taste the scratch. They also smell with their antennae. So they've got the legs, they've got their proboscis, they've got their antennae. They have all these mechanisms to make sure that it's the right plant. If it's the wrong plant, their caterpillars are going to die. Butterflies just don't make mistakes. I mean, it's just amazing. It's one of the greatest wonders of nature to watch how this female can do all of this from such great distances.
In many species, the eggs hatch within a week. Then the newly emerged caterpillar, or larva, wastes no time embarking on the second stage of its journey to adulthood.
We call them eating machines because that's their only purpose in life, is to just eat and grow, eat and grow.
Okay, so there's my 89 butterfly. But Michael used that he chose that to be our little pause picture to tell me to speak to what's just happened. You know, the scientist said the butterfly never makes mistakes. It knows its host plant. It knows it exactly. It knows the right shape of the leaf. It never makes mistakes. Divine will has chosen you as his host for his generative virtue, to sow the seeds of his acts. And the divine will never makes mistakes. That's what the divine will is saying to you through this video. I'm going to take you through it to prove to you if this can happen in nature in this little insect, so you can believe and trust that what God is doing in you is not a mistake. It is his accuracy in choosing you, because he knows your soul better than you know yourself. And it's the way we view ourselves from our past way of identifying ourselves that's an obstacle to this. This is why our past has to die. We have to leave the memories of our past, throw them into God's love and mercy, because as you said your first fiat, when you gave your first fiat and you meant it, you became a new creation. Now we are watching the metamorphosis of the butterfly who becomes a new creature, an entirely new creature from the caterpillar. And this is what I want to show you. Your former life is symbolized by the caterpillar. And what that caterpillar does, and you're going to witness this, what the caterpillar does, in order to die to itself so that it can become a butterfly. Now, the scientist says the only vital activity of the caterpillar is to eat and grow, eat and grow, eat and grow, eat and grow. What was that reading I just did before this talk? Jesus said, with every act you fuse into his will, you give double joy to the Trinity, and they double their sanctity, wisdom and love in you. So when you're eating the food of the divine will by doing these acts in the divine will. That's your food. You're eating, you're growing. You're eating, you're growing. You're eating, you're growing. Jesus said, every time and every act you fuse into the divine will, you double their sanctity in you. You double the joy in your soul. You double the wisdom. You double the beauty. And this is what your office is. To eat and grow, eat and grow, eat and grow, until that transformation of their divinity takes full possession of you. Remember we spoke about Louisa's progression towards that fullness. It took years in her to reach that complete and utter possession of the Trinity. And he taught her little by little by little to reach that stage until she understood she had to be in continuous flight. And that's why the hummingbird is my beautiful emblem of the soul of the divine will, because the hummingbird never stops suckling nectar. The only time she stops is when she's in a state they call torpor, which is a state very similar to Louisa. It's not sleep as we understand it. And after it's regenerated itself, it starts again suckling nectar, and that's what we do in the divine will. We're eating and growing, eating and growing.
A really hungry, busy caterpillar, you can actually hear it eating. It sort of reminds you of corn on the cob, because it, it bites along and then it bites along some more.
It's just munch, 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 munch. Slice and chew, slice and chew, to build up the raw materials for the next stage of life.
Thanks. See, it's eating and growing in order to build up the raw materials for the next stage in life. This is a living sermon here. You're seeing through the metamorphosis of the caterpillar into the butterfly, a perfect example of what Jesus is doing in your soul. And in order to prepare for the next stage, you can't jump from one stage to the next automatically. You have to go through these stages.
A caterpillar could gain in weight so fast that it would be eating its own weight in leafy material every day.
Equipped with powerful jaws and a digestive tract that extends the length of its body, this stomach with legs can multiply its birth weight more than 3,000 times in less than 2 weeks.
To show you how remarkable this weight gain is, imagine you had an 8-pound human baby and he multiplied his weight 3,000 times as he was growing. That would be a 24,000-pound child. That's a big kid.
A caterpillar's growth is punctuated by violent surges of transition called molts.
Imagine the outer skin.
These violent surges of transition, by the way, this is my interpretation of the Book of Heaven into this metamorphosis. When we go through, well, I pretty much know intimately some of my closest friends in the divine will, and they all describe these various stages of their transition to come into the divine will. And some of these stages are quite violent. It was certainly in my life. And what they're describing here, violent stages of transition are absolutely necessary in order for the divine will to destroy in the soul what is an impediment to the transformation of that soul into a divine humanity. Because Jesus is wanting to infuse into our ruptured, disordered humanity his divinity. And this is all in the words of the Mass. This is why he came on earth. This is his singular purpose, to restore humanity to its original divinized state that it was created in the beginning, but even more than that pre-lapsarian state, even greater than that. So every word you hear these scientists say has a significance in the way the Holy Spirit and Jesus and the Father's will works in our soul. And if you read Louisa's life, you will see in her life there was incredible compressions, pressure, sufferings, etc., in order to bring her deeper and deeper into this state of stigmatization in the divine will.
Of a caterpillar as being sort of like a wetsuit. It's got a little bit of stretch to it, but limited. It's waterproof, so they don't dehydrate. Now, as the caterpillar grows, it fills out that wetsuit, and eventually it reaches a point where it can't grow anymore, and it has to make a new, larger version on the inside.
Now, this is really important because you've probably all seen this. I don't have to explain it to you, but he reaches a stage, the caterpillar, where he's growing rapidly, right? But his outer garment, his wetsuit as they call it, can't contain any more weight. It has to moult, shed itself. Now, is this not the same with your humanity? You find you reach a certain stage that if you are going to grow more in the divine will, you have to start shedding some of your, attachments, your clothing, your human desires, your human activities. Because if you don't shed this clothing, and there's many, many lessons in the Book of Heaven on this shedding of the clothing. One is in volume 16, where Jesus talks about the nakedness of Adam and Eve, and then when they shed the light of the divine will, they saw their nakedness without the divine will. But they could be naked because they were prior to that, because they were clothed with its light. And when they looked at each other, they could only see the light of the divine will. And when they divorced themselves from that light, all they could see was their flesh, their carnal flesh, their mortality. And they felt shame. You see? When you grow in the divine will, it's an extraordinary thing, but you see with the eyes of the divine will, and you don't see people or situations with that sense of judgment or shame, or it's different. You have a different vision, okay? So this molting, we're going to see it now, we're going to see it happening over and over and over again. So the skin of the caterpillar is molted and turned away, taken away, to keep allowing the movement of growth to happen in the caterpillar.
A molt begins when a caterpillar spins and then grasps a silk pad, anchors its body securely with small barbs on its legs, and splits its skin near the capsule covering its head.
There are sensors in the cuticle, in the skin of the caterpillar, that are strain detectors. They detect the amount of pressure or strain being put on the skin. And when that is too great, they send a signal to the brain of the caterpillar, which then releases a hormone that causes molting.
A caterpillar will undergo 4 or 5 molts. Its rapidly growing body is composed of 2 distinct cell populations: the larval cells that form all of its organs and enable it to function, and the imaginal cells that ensure its future as a butterfly.
Larval cells are the actual cells of the generative origin for the caterpillar. The imaginal cells are the cells that the divine will put inside the caterpillar that are only there waiting for the emergence of the butterfly. Now Jesus talks in the Book of Heaven about the seed of the divine will being in the apostles, the seed. And he talks about it being in the saints, the sanctity of the virtues, the seed, because these can be compared to the imaginal cells that are in the caterpillar, awaiting the metamorphosis of the caterpillar into the butterfly. But only you now have been given the divine technology, you could call it, to transform those imaginal cells into divine will cells because of the gift of the divine will. The saints that live in the sanctity of the virtues did not have the gift of the generative virtue of the divine will. And they could not do that. They only could go to a certain stage. Jesus says this, they could only reach that certain stage of unity. They could not operate with the generative virtue of the divine will. And in this caterpillar, it was so interesting to me when I saw that there was two cell structures within the caterpillar. One is the larval cells, which belong to the caterpillar, and then there's the imaginal cells, which God put inside the caterpillar, awaiting this final stage where you'll see on this video where the butterfly, the larval cells of the caterpillar have to be dissolved in order to use that dissolved material to form the structure of the butterfly. So this is sort of, I get excited about this because this is teaching us how everything in the natural world is impregnated with these divine truths. And only souls who live in the divine will have the eyesight, or these scientists see it, because they believe in God, they're Christian scientists, and they see the wonderful work of the Creator in this metamorphosis.
In the later instars of the caterpillar, one can begin to see what are called imaginal discs. Now, these are the precursor cell populations for what will become wings and legs or sensory structures in the adult.
Most of these imaginal cell clusters develop in pairs and are positioned throughout the caterpillar's body in locations that correspond to the organs they will eventually help form in the adult.
Imaginal discs are precursors that are there and waiting. They're set aside to make adult structures. And at a certain point in development, those cells are triggered to start to grow.
As the end of the larval stage approaches, the caterpillar stops eating, finds a secluded spot, and spins another silk pad. When finished, it attaches itself with a pair of claspers on the end of its body, then hangs almost motionless.
It will hang there for a day or so, usually in a J position. All kinds of chemical reactions occur within that caterpillar. It changes color and you have no idea what's going on inside there until all of a sudden it pumps the fluid so that the skin begins to split.
The caterpillar's final molt marks the beginning of the third stage of a butterfly's development and the appearance of a remarkable structure called a chrysalis. As the old skin is pushed away, the cremaster, a thin extension on the top of the chrysalis, works its way into position to permanently grasp the silk pad. With a scanning electron microscope, the cremaster is magnified more than 500 times.
The caterpillar has microscopic hooks on the cremaster, and it attaches those hooks to that silk pad that it puts on the bottom of a leaf or twig. And it begins to spin, and this caterpillar spins and spins and spins because it wants to get rid of that old skin that it has.
Well, you see, I know I reached that stage myself, and I don't know if you did, but you get to a point when you're living the sanctity of the virtues, you know there's something greater that you're desiring, but you sense in yourself it's unattainable. It's unattainable to yourself, in what you're doing. And this chrysalis, you go, well, this is what I did, and this is what the hermits do, and contemplative people do. They go into the interior life of silence and prayer, and they intensify that. So in the chrysalis, caterpillars living inside the chrysalis and forming this new creature that will emerge. Well, it's the divine will doing it, of course, and the caterpillar, as you'll see the scientists say, isn't kind of intelligently working all this out for itself. And this spinning, it hangs on this singular silk pad, a new silk pad. It's woven for itself, and it spins and spins and spins. That's what happens when we're ready to go to the next stage. We give ourselves enough solitude, enough prayer, and we're searching, we're desiring union with God, but in a new way than we've ever experienced before. And this is why we go into our interior more and more. And even if we can't do that because of the life we're living, there's this inner desire to do that. And this desire grows so much that we end up shedding the old self. We have to. It's a critical part of our transformation into this new creation, the shedding of the old self. So as you keep watching this, you see the mystery of God's love. He's doing this for us. He did this. This is a theatrical, we're watching a theatrical demonstration, thankfully, from the work of these scientists, these photographers, this technology. We can now see this amazing work in the butterfly, but it's Jesus speaking to us through this creature, and he's saying, this is what I'm doing with you. This is what you have to shed your old skin. Not just once, you know. You have to keep shedding, keep shedding, keep shedding, keep spinning. That's what you do when you do your rounds. It's a revolution. Keep spinning, spinning, spinning until you emerge as the new creation.
During the hour that follows, the chrysalis hardens and takes its final form as one of the most fascinating processes in nature is set into motion. The metamorphosis from caterpillar into butterfly.
What you see in a chrysalis is not a shapeless mass, but in fact, something very much like a mold for the adult butterfly.
You see the wing pads where the adult wings are going to form, and you see the head and the compound eyes appear, visible through the outer case of the pupal shell. Abdominal segments are very clearly separated from the thoracic segments where the wings are going to be attached. All of this is astoundingly new compared to the caterpillar, where everything looked sort of the same down the whole length of the body.
This transition from an earthbound plant-eating arthropod with limited vision and mobility into a beautiful winged insect that feeds on nectar, navigates with exceptional senses, and can fly 50 miles in a day.
An earthbound, what was it?
What was it?
Sorry, it's an earthbound arthropod. Well, it's got multiple legs. You see, that's what I love that language, because it's like we're being transformed from an earthbound anthropod with very limited activity, limited mental capacity, etc., into this incredibly new creature. And I love the way they said earthbound, and as you see the caterpillar, it can't move very quickly. It just eats, and that's all it does all day. And the you can see this in people that are still living in their human will. They become completely earthbound, earth-focused, and they're doing the same thing every day, going to work, come home, switch on the television, watch the news, go and next day, get up again, go the same sort of like same, and not even scratching the surface, of the depth of their true destiny, their soul, their eternal destiny, and this is what the caterpillars are.
Is truly a marvel of the natural world. Exactly how it happens is still very much a mystery. Yet innovative research at the level of molecules and cells provides intriguing new clues.
There is some continuity of tissues from caterpillar to adult butterfly, but most of what was there in the caterpillar is going to disappear and be turned into new structures that have no analog in the caterpillar. For instance, there's nothing like the compound eye of the adult butterfly present in the caterpillar. There's nothing like the proboscis present in the caterpillar, or the long articulated legs in the caterpillar. So these are all novel structures that are going to be built.
Do you see that the new creation that you are destined to become has no analog? See, they said the caterpillar has no analog in the butterfly. So it's not true, the Darwinian theory as they speak about in the end of this video, it just cannot be applied to this metamorphosis. It has no way of progressively changing this creature into another creature, because this is an entirely new creature. And your divine self doesn't have an analog in the self that existed before in your humanity. Your humanity remains, but it becomes divine. Even St. Paul says that. He talks about the difference in different states of being. I can't remember the exact quote, but your divine self, the analog for your divine self is the humanity of Jesus, the resurrected humanity of Jesus. That's the architecture for your divine self. It's not it doesn't have the analog of your human generative self, the generation from your parents. It's becoming a divine self. And the architecture and the origin of the genes of your divine self is in Jesus. Because he says you will become another Jesus. So the same applies here with the caterpillar, as they're saying, has no analog. In the butterfly, there's no analog for what existed previously in the caterpillar. But what happens is you'll see the dissolution of the cells of the caterpillar, and then God uses those dissoluted cells in order to reform the cells, and that's what he's doing in you. He's reforming your whole structure according to the origin of all human beings, which is in Jesus' humanity. That's actually consistent, long-standing teaching in the church, especially in the theology of St. Lawrence of Brindisi, who's called the Apostolic Doctor, whose theology is so profound. So St. Lawrence of Brindisi says, the origin for all creation existed in the incarnational circle, that is Jesus, Mary and Joseph, who existed for all eternity in the mind of God. And the architecture for everything in creation has come from these three persons. If you want to search that out, you can, but it's we are being restored to that divine architecture, that in order for us to be able to live in heaven, we cannot live in heaven in our current state of a disordered humanity, a dysfunctional, disordered humanity. We have to be transformed before we can enter heaven.
In a metamorphic insect, what you've got is two body plans. You have to first form one functional body plan, and then you have to switch gears and you have to take and form a new body plan. I am amazed by development when it goes from egg to caterpillar, because it's such an intricate process. But then you have to enter into the chrysalis stage and you have to get it right again. So it's like the problem squared.
The creation of a butterfly begins with the partial destruction of the caterpillar. Inside the chrysalis, larval cells that form the caterpillar's limbs and organs are systematically digested and broken down.
You've got to get rid of or digest the caterpillar tissues. They won't work for the adult. In fact, the cells themselves disappear, but then their components are recycled and are turned into a kind of soup out of which the adult structures will be built.
Throughout this process, the imaginal cells, the foundation of the adult insect's body, are preserved to differentiate and multiply.
Now, cell death is programmed. It's not something that happens by accident. If you kill the wrong cells, you're in deep trouble.
It's very carefully engineered. You're going to save some of the cell populations, so you got to know where you're going to end up before you start. You don't want to digest everything, just things that need to be eliminated. Then the imaginal discs rapidly begin to proliferate, and you can trace a continuous pathway into the pattern on the wing.
This timeless drama of death and renewal is performed in the seclusion of the chrysalis, without audience or applause.
Well, you know what that means, don't you? Without audience or applause. This was the reading I did just before this. Our Lord says He hides His activity in the creature. And without audience or applause, He's doing this prodigy. He calls it the prodigy of prodigies, to transform a soul that's living in their human will into a soul that lives in His divine will. He calls it the prodigy of prodigies. And it's done without audience or applause. You are a hidden work of the Creator, of the Father, of the Son, of the Holy Spirit, and of our beloved Mother. You are a hidden work. And it's done without audience or applause, because like the butterfly, the great revelation will become visible of this prodigy when the kingdom comes on earth. Everyone will be able to see the prodigy of the work of divine love in each one of you. But now, for now, it's invisible. It's an invisible work. You can't even see it for yourself. You can't even visualize it. It's so magnificent. And Jesus told Louisa, if he allowed her to see what he was doing in her, she would die of pure joy. So he didn't show it to her. This work is so invisible that he couldn't reveal it to her because he said you would die. And he couldn't allow that to happen. So you can see here the caterpillar doesn't really know what's sort of going on. It's just doing God's will because every created thing is programmed to do God's will. But this transformation, I love some of the language the scientists use. It's done in hiddenness and without applause. How beautiful is that?
During the past 2 decades, scientists have worked diligently to pull back the curtain.
I've been at this about 15 years, and the possibility of somehow getting in there to photograph what's inside a chrysalis, that question was out there all along, and it occurred to me that magnetic resonance imaging might be perfect tool to use to see what goes on inside a chrysalis.
The challenge of visually documenting a butterfly's development led biologist Richard Stringer to Duke University and its Center for In Vivo Microscopy. There, over a 10-day period, monarch butterfly chrysalises were scanned throughout a complete cycle of metamorphosis. Each scan visually sliced the chrysalis into more than 200 sections. 8 hours into the first day, Stringer observed significant changes.
Even though it was very early in the development of the chrysalis, you could already see things forming that were going to be part of the butterfly, including the head, including the brain, including leg muscles, wings, antennae. The longer it's scanned, the more detail you get.
Stringer's magnetic resonance data was later used to create a 3-dimensional dissection of the butterfly's body as it took shape within the chrysalis. On day 1, the caterpillar's massive digestive tract is still nearly full size. By the 10th day, hours prior to the butterfly's emergence, the tract has been totally reconstructed. It is now about 25% of its original volume, ideal for the adult insect that will feed almost exclusively on nectar. During this transformation, the butterfly's reproductive organs, non-existent in the caterpillar, develop completely.
Digestive tract meaning symbolizing what we can absorb. We lose our appetite. We lose our appetite for worldly things. And therefore, our digestive tract, we're talking about spiritual thing here, our spiritual digestive tract shrinks. Just like the caterpillar, could eat, and grow, and then now, inside the chrysalis, what's the chrysalis? The womb of the divine will. As soon as we give our fiat, we enter the womb of the divine will. And we allow the divine will to operate this great, mysterious transformation in us. We allow it. The only thing we're doing is the spinning part, doing our rounds. We don't have to understand it. We don't have to figure it all out. We just have to do what Jesus asks us to do. Continuous rounds in Him. Then He does the miraculous transformation in us. So our digestive tract shrinks, becomes 25% of what it normally, in us it can go down to 0 because Louisa lost her appetite for anything except Jesus. So she did not eat food even though she was ordered to take a little food each day, which came back up perfectly perfumed and whole and beautiful. She did not eat, she did not sleep. She went into a state which could be similar to torpor, which was her body petrified, and was in a state of almost death state, while her soul continued its flight in the divine will all night until she re-entered her body in the morning. So do you see the analogy for this is the appetite of the caterpillar, which was totally different. It ate all these leaves. The digestive tract becomes smaller so that the new emerging insect will only eat nectar. So we, in our life, in the divine will, are only interested in eating the nectar that comes from these divine will acts. And once you become proficient in continuous rounds, you get so used to tasting this nectar from these divine will acts that anything else becomes tasteless. Yes, tasteless. And sometimes it becomes absolutely repugnant. Like there's certain things, oh God help me, the visionaries said at Garabandal, it'll be our sins of omission that will confront us the most at the time of the warning. So I look back and I say, well, sitting down watching that TV program mightn't have been essentially sinful, but all the time we wasted our time doing all these things which were not feeding our soul. And Jesus said in that reading this morning, he said, you are renting my heart. When you refuse to do these acts of my will, you are renting my heart. So this is why this transformation, as soon as you can be docile enough to receive Jesus' commands and desires and to live in them, the sooner you will reach this transformative stage into a new creation. And people will notice it. They're probably noticing changes in you already.
While its tube-like heart is remodeled to fit and function within the abdomen of the butterfly. In the front of the chrysalis, dramatic anatomical changes continue. The caterpillar's simple eyes, capable only of discerning darkness and light, are replaced by large, complex organs of vision. A muscular system that will power flight and locomotion is built from both imaginal and recycled larval cells. The butterfly's 6 legs, 2 antennae, and feeding tube are individually formed while tightly compacted into a mass against the wall of the chrysalis. And 4 wings, each with elaborate networks of veins and scales, are shaped, decorated, and refined in less than 2 weeks.
It's like a different organism. And as the week goes on, transitions have to take place in the heart. Transitions have to take place in the antennae. Transitions have to take place in the reproductive organs. You got a big orchestra in there. You got a great big orchestra, and you got a conductor, some conducting force that's responsible for it all. I can say without any doubt that it was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen.
caterpillar into butterfly. The transformation to an entirely new way of living is nearly complete. During the first moments after emergence, the butterfly makes final preparations to fly and eat as it finishes construction of its proboscis and wings.
The proboscis is a straw-like tongue, hollow in the middle, and the butterfly has muscles in its head which can create a suction, a sort of a suction pump, and draw nectar up.
The proboscis is, as it comes out of the chrysalis, is two. It's two, and these two have to be woven into one before it can actually draw nectar. So what I saw, you'll see it happen. What I saw, this is the human will has to be woven into one with the divine will before it can draw the nectar of the divine will acts. And it also, the scientists will tell you in this, if the process of weaving the two proboscis, which is those curly things that come out of the top of the butterfly, it cannot function to draw nectar. And that is the whole teaching, the fundamental teaching in the Book of Heaven is constantly saying, your human will must be fused into my will, my divine will, before you can receive the effects of these acts of my divinity. And so the butterfly itself will die very rapidly if these two proboscis aren't fused together. And the other aspect, which I didn't mention, but I probably will be able to talk to you about it, is how the legs of the butterfly, in order to smell the perfume of this nectar, it scratches the leaf of the particular plant. Now that particular plant, it has to go to this one particular plant to get the food that it requires to survive. It can't go to any other plant. So the plant we're going to is the act, the divine act that Jesus does. We go to that plant and we scratch it, like the butterfly scratches the plant to release the nectar and also the perfume of that nectar. We are scratching, Jesus says we must masticate these divine truths in every one of his acts. We don't just fly through them and don't sit with them. We've got to sit with them, scratch. Scratching is for the butterfly, is to release this perfume and the nectar so he can drink it with this proboscis, which is turned into one. So it's all there in the Book of Heaven, and you didn't have to see this video if you read the Book of Heaven. But when you see it, it's already happening in nature everywhere. So, because the reason I showed it to you is a lot of people put up a barrier and they say, oh, I don't think I could live this life. You know, it seems too difficult. But the butterfly is just doing the divine will, and it is doing what we're meant to be doing. And so if you can see that it's possible for an insect or a hummingbird, then you want to become like them and obey the divine will. Scientists deliberately are not preaching it in a religion. They're believers, but they're making a statement so that anyone can watch this without feeling it's some Christian preaching to them. And therefore, they're using their wisdom and saying, and showing them the reality which cannot be denied, right? It cannot be denied. And allowing the watcher to reach their own conclusion, hopefully the right one.
JP, is they pick the one plant. There's the leaf and there's the flower, so that's the same plant, is it? The leaf for the egg and the plant for the nectar, the flower for the nectar.
No, they get the nectar from the leaf.
From the leaf, not the
flower. Oh, that's my.
That's the
I didn't
that's
see
the other.
Caterpillar.
That's the honeycomb.
Yeah, that's the caterpillar, isn't it?
The caterpillar eats the leaf.
The honey.
You're thinking of the hummingbird.
The hummingbird does.
Yes.
So it gets the nectar from the same leaf.
Plant, yes. Yes.
I also noticed that when it went to go and form itself, it was it fused because it was that spit that it had. It was fused.
Yes.
And it forms a J, which is fused to Jesus.
Yes.
Well done, Sonia.
Observant.
We've got to leave something for all you guys.
I love the transformation.
No, the fact that they keep saying it's in the form of a J, it's the form of a J, so it's wonderful that we can observe all these little things, because it's Jesus.
Within the chrysalis, the proboscis developed as two separate pieces. Now, immediately following emergence, the butterfly must assemble them into a single unit, or die of starvation.
It's two half straws. There's a channel on one side and has to get it into the channel the other side. You'll see two little appendages on their head called palpi, and those palpi seem to protect the proboscis and help that proboscis get put together.
Two palpi also, as Jesus said to Louisa when she, frequently complained, of his absences and everything. He said, well, Adam, he said, you're in a much better position than Adam, because Adam didn't have me and our beloved mother to help you. You have me. So when he just says there's two palpi on the head that assist the proboscis to perform its function. And you're about to see how the two proboscis, which human will and divine will, must fuse together to form the one in order to be able to draw the nectar. But you have these two palpi assisting in this process. And it might be an imaginal thing for me, but I could see the analogy for what Jesus says to Louisa, you always have me and your mother to help you in this process, and you're never alone in this process.
As the butterfly knits together the proboscis, its wings also take on their final structure.
When the butterfly comes out of the chrysalis, the wings are like velvet. They're soft, they're pliable. There's veins, the wings are filled with veins.
What the butterfly does is, using its abdominal muscles, pumps hemolymph, fluid, into the veins, into the wings, and they quickly expand to their full size and shape.
Each of the butterfly's 4 wings is covered with thousands of microscopic scales that are positioned like shingles on a rooftop. These scales are not only arranged for aerodynamic efficiency and spectacular patterns, they also act as solar panels, collecting heat to warm the flight muscles of the cold-blooded insect.
Okay, well, really, like when you see the fullness of this video, you'll see why the wings of the butterfly have these, amazing solar panels. So within us, we have this architecture with which once we make our fusion into the divine will, we're able to absorb the sunlight of the divine will. So every one of our acts, which if you look there when it's magnified, is uncountable in the wings of this tiny insect, which is deliberately placed there by God in order to absorb the sunlight. But there's much more to these wings of the butterfly, which we'll speak about at the end, which it also has fragments of a magnet in the wings of the butterfly. And this is all relatable to what is actually spoken of in the divine will when Jesus speaks of the magnet that is in each one of the acts of the soul fused into the divine will. And it forms this magnetization that's so strong. It's so strong that as soon as you fuse your act, the magnet of the divine will, or the magnetization, you know what happens with a magnet. It's like half a second is like that. And that's what happens. The divine will comes as soon as you do your fusion and magnetizes himself to your act. And you'll see this happening in the butterfly.
A butterfly's eyes are also formed from a vast network of component parts. Thousands of hexagonal light receptors work in unison to produce a mosaic view of the insect's environment. While the spherical shape of each compound eye creates a field of view more than 180 degrees wide.
They have 4 color vision systems, pigment systems, which enable them to see from the ultraviolet to infrared. Butterflies have better color vision than humans.
While the did you notice how the eye of the caterpillar is a totally new creation? It has magnificent vision. The eye of the caterpillar only could see light and dark, nothing more. Now what's being described here is extraordinary because do you remember me speaking the other day that when you enter the divine will and you allow the divine will to grow in you, you develop what's called omni-clairvoyance. Omni means all-encompassing, everything. And the more you do your acts and rounds in the divine will, this omni-clairvoyance will grow in you. It will become more and more the divine way of seeing things expands in you. The divine way of hearing will grow in you. The divine way of speaking will grow in you. And everything will become divine. And this is self-evident in what we're going to see here in the butterfly.
The butterfly's antennae, legs, and feet complete its sensory system. The antennae that control balance and equilibrium in flight recognize the aromas most important to the butterfly. Their clubbed ends are covered with scales that can detect the scent of a host plant or prospective mate more than a mile away. A butterfly has 3 pairs of jointed legs with scales and fine hairs that sense vibrations and possibly sound. While its legs and claws are lined with nerve cells that react upon touch to a leaf's distinct flavor. This heightened sense of taste is activated whenever the insect scratches the surface of a plant.
Some of the best biologists and chemists in the world are now studying the process of metamorphosis on a series of new levels, trying to integrate this with the advances and techniques that we have from molecular biology to modern imaging systems.
In the case of butterflies, it's like a fine piece of art. You can appreciate it at a sort of technical level in terms of what was required to get the pigment on the canvas and so forth. But what's going on is so much richer than that and so much more significant than that.
We know just the bare outlines of a few of the processes involved for metamorphosis. It's a mystery. It's like a black box. Input larva, black box. Output butterfly. What happened? What happened?
We only know a thousandth of what's going on inside those insects, inside that pinhead brain, and all the things that it can do, the way it can navigate, the way it can migrate, the way it can find the females, the way it can find the plant. It's one of the great wonders of the world.
As science probes deeper into the life cycles of the 20,000 species of butterflies known to inhabit the Earth, one story stands unique from any other. It is an epic saga that unfolds across a continent and a journey to the heart of the beauty and mystery that epitomize metamorphosis. For more than 30 years, researchers from throughout the world, including biologist Thomas Emmel, have traveled to a secluded forest to study a phenomenon unparalleled in nature: the monarch butterfly's migration to Mexico.
I've gone down every year since 1981, and many years made a number of trips, 2, 3, 4 trips a year. Here's a butterfly species that does something truly spectacular. Just imagine 300 million monarchs in one site that have flown 2,500, 3,000 miles to end up in these tiny 12 areas that still exist in the transvolcanic range of south central Mexico.
The monarch's migration begins each September when most of the North American population east of the Rocky Mountains departs for central Mexico. Their journey can span more than 2,500 miles and is critical for 2 reasons. Monarchs are tropical butterflies unable to endure the freezing winter temperatures of the Midwest and Canada, and their life cycle depends upon the milkweed. More than 100 species of milkweed grow throughout the United States during the spring and summer. It is the only plant a female monarch will select to host her eggs. Milkweed leaves contain cardiac glycosides, toxic chemicals that can cause illness or death. After hatching, the caterpillar eats the plants and stores their poisons in its outer layer of skin. Then during metamorphosis, the glycosides are transferred from caterpillar to adult. And whenever the monarch spreads its wings, their distinctive pattern sends a warning to predators. Don't eat me. I taste terrible.
Michael, oh, thank you. That is what Jesus says. Once you enter this new life, or butterfly life, is once you enter the life of the divine will, Satan cannot enter therein. You are doing continuous divine acts, and he said he can't even get near to you because what is impregnated in you is poison to him. It is more, causes him more pain. This is Jesus' exact words. It causes him more pain than the pains of hell. to come near to you. In the pains of hell, it's the justice of the divine will that is acting upon the inhabitants of hell. But a soul that lives in the divine will is living in the Son of the divine will. And therefore it is living in heaven. It's Jesus, in fact, who lives in that soul. So Satan cannot come near to Jesus, because if Jesus, once he comes near to Jesus, he feels intense pain. Like exorcists, at least 6 or 7 exorcists that are renowned in America say that just the mere name of Jesus they can't pronounce. They can't pronounce the name Mary because it causes them such pain. You can actually hear the demons speaking in exorcism, and they cannot pronounce the name of Mary. They'll say her, that one, that woman, but they cannot pronounce the name, because as soon as they pronounce it, it causes them the pains of hell. So when you're living in Jesus, you're also living in Mary, because they are one. You're living inside their hearts and their humanities, and they are operating in you in these acts. Because you have been sublimated, your divine will is sublimated. Right? So it's not active, it's still alive, because God never takes your human will away from you, but you've sublimated it and it's prostrated at the throne of the Father. So it's no longer active. So when you're constantly fusing your acts, it's the divine acts of Jesus and Mary that are operating you. That's why Satan cannot even approach you. But what he does is he will try to cause around, in the arena around you. It could be a neighbour, it could be a family member, it could be emails coming into your email box, it could be whatever. He tries to disrupt this kingdom that is reigning in you. And of course that's what he did when Jesus was on earth. He tried to disrupt the arena around Jesus, because he could not actually enter Jesus or get near to him, except when he was permitted to, and that was when he went into the desert to confront his arch enemy, and allow the temptation to happen.
Like the monarch, milkweed cannot survive the harsh North American winter, and by the end of August, it goes to seed.
And at that point, the monarch stops all reproductive activity. If it's a female, no more eggs. If it's a male, no more sperm. They still feed, are active, but they show no interest in sex or reproduction.
With no milkweed for their eggs until spring, the monarchs devote themselves entirely to preparation for a transcontinental flight. They spend the final weeks of summer feeding on nectar to build reserves of carbohydrates and fats, the fuel for their journey.
You lose interest in sex. Like, now you'll find this in the saints that have been illuminated, and even in myself, in my life, you say you lose interest in everything on the human level. So what you would have been searching for or attracted to in your former life, you lose interest. But this is for a specific strategic act. In these monarch butterflies, they eat more than usual in order to build up the carbohydrates and fats and everything they need for this very, very long migration to their new breeding ground. It's the only time in their life that God permits them to live for 9 months without food. Now this is very significant because we, in entering the generative virtue of the divine will, right? Because these monarchs are like all creatures and created things, all they're interested in is generating themselves, right? All God's interested in is generating himself. So that's the nature of God, and it's the nature of created things that live in the divine will. You'll see how every species, every animal, every insect, its main driving force is to generate itself. You know, you've seen the salmon, you know, swimming upstream and finding their breeding ground, etc. This is an imperative for species of all kinds. It's generation, generation, generation. But created things can only generate their own kind. You know, a rose can't generate anything except a rose, etc. So the divine will can't generate himself, his divinity in humanity. And unless he can't generate himself unless your humanity, which formerly was attempting to live a life of holiness, dies to itself and fuses itself into his divine nature, so he can operate in you. And this is his driving force. He says in the Book of Heaven, this was all that was in my mind, all I thought about, all I considered was this generation, the Father generating his divine Son in the love of the Holy Spirit, because it's always divine love at work, you know. So this generation of oneself, even in human beings, the sexual desire, the origin of the sexual desire that God planted in each one of us was primarily this imperative, you know, kind of imperative, even when one's not thinking of it consciously, it's the imperative to generate oneself. But now this generation of human beings has been corrupted by a satanic ideology that is now telling people, well, you can have sex without worrying about whether you're going to generate yourself. Just have sex because sex is an expression of love, you know, love. That's the wrong kind of love, because it's all about self-satisfying love. It's not about this generation of self.
So it's when the human becomes divine that they are no longer two but one.
Yes, darling.
Yeah, but just with, you know, what we were discussing.
Yeah, exactly. They're no longer two but one, but the operative nature that's operating is the divine nature. That's the operative nature. But God does not force a soul, so he requires you to actively surrender your will. Now this doesn't happen only once. Even Our Lady said, people make the mistaken belief that because I was conceived immaculate without sin, that I did not have to sacrifice my human will for the rest of my life. She said, every moment in my life was a new fiat, a new sacrifice, a new martyrdom of my will. So let's get that straight. And the same thing is happening to Louisa, because it's right to put Our Lady on a pedestal, but she makes it very clear to us that her moment by moment, she sacrificed her human will, repeating her original act at conception, which she laid her will down at the throne of her Father. So any of you read that?
Yes.
Yes, you have. Good. Just to make sure I'm not saying things that aren't true.
Monarchs born in the spring or early summer have a lifespan of only 2 to 4 weeks. But the generation that emerges in August is genetically programmed to live up to 9 months, a provision crucial to survival.
The last generation of the summer, the one that's going to live all winter and into the following spring, is really an interesting problem for biologists, because here you have 2-3 generations preceding that generation where the adult lives at most 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and then dies. And now all of a sudden a generation's produced that's going to live 9 months, 9 times as long. It's thought that there's a genetic difference comprised of about 6 genes that are unique in this generation that enable it to live that long.
Often called the Methuselah generation, their longevity will enable the butterflies to fly south for 8 weeks, endure 4 months of winter, and then start the return trip north to establish a new generation of monarchs in the spring. With the approach of autumn, the angle of the sun at midday drops below 56 degrees. The shortening days are the butterflies' cue to begin their migration. A network of sensory organs will enable them to navigate throughout the journey south.
The question is how the butterfly figures out what direction to go. We're looking at several things. The butterfly is able to detect day length through tiny organs on its antennae. It's able to detect the position of the sun above the horizon by visual senses, and also compensate with a biological time clock in its brain for the movement of that sun from early in the morning on the eastern horizon to the western horizon at the end of the day when it sets. So they're moving south, following the sun's directions, and they're adjusting their flight each day.
From as far north as Canada, Michigan, and Maine, the monarchs travel an average of 50 miles a day as they glide on currents of warm thermal air. By mid-October, their primary migration routes converge, as most of the butterflies funnel into southern Texas before crossing the border. Some, however, take a more direct route across the Gulf of Mexico. In late October, on evenings following the passage of a cold weather front, monarchs descend upon the gas and oil rigs throughout the Gulf. Perhaps attracted by the lights, the butterflies interrupt the longest non-stop leg of their journey. Here, among the pipes, ropes, and heavy machinery, they rest for the night. In 1993, biologist Gary Ross and a team of volunteers documented monarchs on more than 20 platforms during a 2-week period. At daybreak, the butterflies warmed their flight muscles, calculated their bearing by the position of the sun, and then resumed their journey. After crossing the southern border of Texas, the eastern monarch population merges into a flyway about 50 miles wide. During this leg of their migration south, they follow the geography of the Sierra Madre Oriental mountain range. Then, near a region called the Sierra Gorda, they abruptly change direction and cut through a pass heading southwest toward the interior of Mexico.
And there they find the end of the desert and the start of a transverse mountain range that runs west-east, and that's the Transvolcanic Range.
The Transvolcanic is the tallest range in Mexico. Its mountains contain rich deposits of heavy metals that may play an important role in the monarch's navigation.
Gold, iron, manganese, copper, all of these metals created an anomalous magnetic field. And this seems to be important in bringing the monarchs in, because the monarchs have tiny particles of magnetite, the mineral magnetite, in their body at the base of the wing and in the thorax and abdomen. And these are believed to help them navigate to precisely this mountain range, because there's a very strong magnetic anomaly as one approaches this range due to all these heavy metals near the surface. So the particles of magnetite rotate like a little bar magnet inside a cell, and that cues the monarch that needs to head in a certain direction.
Now this is a quote, there's several quotes, I've got several references in the Book of Heaven from volume 20, volume 16, etc., about the powerful magnet of the divine will. And you can see this, the butterfly itself having these small magnets in its wing, which are drawing it like this magnetization to the exact spot where the divine will is destined for it to regenerate itself. And the magnet of your acts fused into the divine will is what draws you deeper and deeper into the exact spot, the exact acts, etc., where you will allow the divine will in you to generate himself. See then what one additional knowledge about my will means. By carrying the prime act of God within themselves, they will bring with them a magnetic force, a powerful magnet, in order to draw creatures to repeat the prime act of God. With their light, they will bring the disillusionment of the human will. Hallelujah.
Amen.
With their heat, they will soften the hardest hearts to bend before this divine act. And creatures will feel captivated to wanting to model themselves on this act. Aren't you happy that you're an agent for this? Therefore, the more knowledges I manifest to you about my will, the more quickly is the kingdom of the divine fiat drawn upon the earth. Hallelujah.
Amen. Yes.
What's the date of that?
Well, Michael,
Volume 20. Volume 20.
Yeah, January.
January the 1st, 1920.
Is it?
1927. Sorry, you can't see it.
1927.
volume 20, January the 1st, 1927. There's many, many references to the magnet of the divine will. So the more knowledges you acquire, right, and that's your reading of the Book of Heaven, etc., coming to this retreat, you're acquiring more knowledges. You're developing this magnetization in your wings, which is your rounds. And you're doing your rounds because Jesus uses that language. Let your flight in my divine will be continuous. So you're flapping, those butterflies virtually almost non-stop are migrating across thousands and thousands of miles attracted by this great magnetic range in Mexico. Because the divine will has placed this inside of them as part of their, instinctive nature. Whereas in us, we're doing it by choice, by our freedom of our human will to magnetize ourselves to the divine will. I'll just read it to you again because it's so important. See then what one additional knowledge about my will means. By carrying the prime act of God within themselves, they will bring with them a magnetic force, a powerful magnet, in order to draw creatures to repeat the prime act of God. With their light, they will bring the disillusionment of the human will. With their heat, they will soften the hardest hearts to bend before this divine act. And creatures will feel captivated to wanting to model themselves on this act. Oh, how wonderful. Therefore, the more knowledges I manifest to you about my will, the more quickly is the kingdom of the divine fiat drawn upon the earth.
Until late in the 20th century, the only people to ever observe the butterfly's arrival in Mexico were the farmers and miners who lived and worked in these volcanic mountains. Then, on January 2nd, 1975, in a forest 70 miles west of Mexico City, a spectacular discovery opened the door for the rest of the world. Millions of monarch butterflies had gathered in a forest of Oyamel firs 10,000 feet above sea level. Frederick Urquhart, a Canadian biologist who devoted his career to the search for this colony, described it as a glorious, incredible place where butterflies swirl through the air like autumn leaves, shimmering against the mountain sky and drifting across our vision in a blizzard of orange and black. Science now glimpsed the true magnitude of the eastern monarch's migration.
One of the really remarkable things about this migration is that all of these individuals have never made the trip before. It was their grandparents or great-grandparents 2, 3, 4 generations ago. They have no leader who has made the trip before, unlike whooping cranes or sandhill cranes. They don't have an older, experienced adult to take the lead and show them where to go, where to stop at night. But in the end, it ends up on the very same trees, same area, same slope of the mountain that its parents and grandparents left from the previous year.
Since 1975, a dozen permanent overwintering colonies have been discovered in these mountains. Each maintains a critically balanced microclimate that helps sustain the monarchs until spring. Average temperatures in the colonies range from 35 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, warm enough to protect the insects from freezing, and cool enough to minimize their expenditure of energy. For more than 4 months, hundreds of millions of butterflies live in a state of semi-hibernation while slowly consuming the reserves of nutrients they accumulated during the summer. The bark and needles on the fir trees provide stable footholds, and by flocking in roosts several layers deep, they can endure days or weeks of inclement weather. With the arrival of spring, the insects prepare to depart the overwintering sites. After the sun warms the colony, the monarchs leave their roosts for a few hours each day. They travel short distances in search of nectar and water that will nourish them during their journey north. At lower elevations, they feed on the new bloom of wildflowers and draw moisture from the damp grass and the rivulets that run down from the mountains. The lengthening days also trigger a change in the monarch's biology. In early March, the butterfly's reproductive organs become active as the males produce sperm and the females eggs. After mating, they leave the colonies and head north, ready to establish a new generation. The monarch's departure from Mexico coincides with the appearance of a new crop of milkweed in southern Texas. When the females find the host plants, they lay their eggs. Their life cycle now complete, they will soon die. Throughout the spring and summer, successive generations of monarchs, each living about 4 weeks, follow the milkweed as it grows progressively across the Midwest and into southern Canada. Then in late August, near a dairy farm in Minnesota or a lakeshore in Ontario, butterflies from a new Methuselah generation emerge, ready to undertake the Great Migration once again.
The series of steps that the monarch takes during this trip, both coming south and going north again in the spring, is truly astounding. Here's an insect moving by the billions between 3 countries. To imagine a tiny brain the size of a monarch brain being able to carry all the information that it needs to make this 2,500-mile trip, adjusting daily for the movement of the sun as it drops lower on the horizon, getting near the overwintering site in Mexico and somehow ending up in the same mountain range that their grandparents came from the previous spring. But that tiny brain puts all of this together. It is a wonderful mystery. It's going to attract scientists' attention for many, many decades or centuries to come. And we are only beginning to understand how miraculous this is.
It's impossible to look at a caterpillar turning into a butterfly and not ask how. Their metamorphosis, their migration, their life cycle. How did this happen? How is it regulated? How is it controlled? This astonishing, remarkable transformation. A biologist who encounters a puzzle-like metamorphosis is going to view that puzzle through an analytical filter, a lens. It's a way of trying to understand the problem. And for most biologists, that lens is going to be an undirected evolutionary process.
Since the late 19th century, most explanations for the life cycle of a butterfly or any other organism have shared a basic premise. To be considered scientific, they must rely exclusively upon undirected natural causes. This view was first published by Charles Darwin in his theory of evolution through random variation and natural selection. And today, it is widely accepted as a foundation of modern biology. But can such a theory account for the origin of metamorphosis?
On the evolutionary view of life, in particular on the Darwinian view of life, everything that an organism does, every feature that it has, all of its details ultimately relate to the requirements of natural selection. So to build the first butterflies, natural selection would have had to work entirely through genetic mutations. They're the raw materials of evolution.
A mutation is an error in the DNA of a living organism, an alteration of the genetic code. The theory of natural selection contends that the accumulation of mutations over enormous periods of time fuel the evolution of all complex life on Earth.
Generally speaking, mutations are mistakes. It's a change to the DNA, and these mutations happen in a random way. They're not guided or directed to happen in the right order, in the right sequence, in the right time.
There's no foresight involved in this process, no vision of what the organism needs in the future. Now, there's a real problem with that, especially when you consider the single most important element of metamorphosis, the chrysalis.
A butterfly chrysalis connects two fundamentally different ways of living. It is both a bridge and a workshop, where one type of organism is transformed into another. The magnitude of this transformation has been compared to a Model T Ford that suddenly encases itself within a garage. Inside, most of the car breaks down into fragments of metal, rubber, and glass. These pieces then reorganize themselves into components more complex than any that previously existed in the Model T. After several days, the garage door bursts open and a radically different mode of transportation lifts off into the sky.
Now, an analogy like that is pure whimsy. But even if it were somehow possible, I don't think turning a car into a helicopter would be nearly as impressive as the actual transformation that takes place inside a chrysalis.
From the moment the chrysalis is formed, caterpillar tissues are destroyed and then recycled to help build wings, compound eyes, reproductive organs, and navigational systems of stunning beauty and efficiency. Yet despite the importance of cell death in the chrysalis, the origin of the process defies the basic logic of natural selection.
One of the fundamental requirements of natural selection is reproduction. You've got to be able to make copies of yourself, in particular of your genes. You've got to be able to pass them on. But a chrysalis, unless it represents a bridge to something yet to come, is really a casket. If you're a caterpillar, you're entering your own grave. Turning most of your body into a molecular soup would be suicide.
A caterpillar, unless it makes it through to the adult, is no good because it can't reproduce. You're not going to have offspring, and so you're a dead-end street evolutionarily. So it wouldn't be any benefit at all to kill yourself unless you've got a hidden plan up your sleeve. You know, like, okay, I know I can go ahead and commit suicide because there's a new me waiting to happen.
The caterpillar is not going to enter the chrysalis without simultaneously knowing I've got a plan for getting out of this. I'm heading towards the adult butterfly. I'm going to reconstitute these tissues in the adult form, emerge, and go on my way. But that's not how natural selection operates. It can't look into the future and somehow anticipate what an evolving organism is going to need in a week or a month or 1,000 years from now. So if the first caterpillars were evolving into existence, without foresight, it's highly unlikely natural selection would retain a destructive process like cell death.
This absence of foresight is not the only challenge to Darwinian theory. Biologists have long recognized that natural selection cannot succeed by taking large evolutionary leaps. Instead, the process can only move forward through a series of small, incremental steps.
In evolution, it's the smaller scale changes that have a better chance of being passed on because they're relatively limited in their scope. That means they're disrupting less, and they're more likely to be tolerated by the organism. But when it comes to the origin of metamorphosis, the notion of gradual evolutionary change comes to a dead end.
By its very nature, metamorphosis is an all-or-nothing proposition. And throughout biological history, its success is hinged upon the immediate availability of a full set of instructions, including genes, proteins, and the developmental program required to integrate them.
It all has to be in place ahead of time. It needs to have the genes in place, the regulatory elements that are going to turn the genes on and off. It has to have all the cells pre-programmed to do what they're going to do when the time comes, so they respond to the signals they get in the right way. The larval cells have to know they're going to die. You got to remember the caterpillar isn't thinking about things. It's not saying, okay, now it's time to dissolve my epidermis, and okay, what about that gut? Got to get working on that gut. No, it has to happen rapidly and in a coordinated fashion. Once you're committed to the chrysalis stage, there's no going back. You have to complete the transition.
A caterpillar that's equipped to go 10% or 25% of the way through metamorphosis is no way through metamorphosis. Part way into a process that requires getting out the other side as a fully formed adult doesn't work.
Human will, that's the chrysalis stage. You have to complete the transition. There's no going back.
Amen.
Okay.
You have to recreate adult legs, adult antennae, adult eyes. You have to change the shape of the brain and the connections between the antennae and the eyes. You have to reformat the gut so that it switches from eating plant material to eating nectar. How many mutations does it take? And how do you coordinate all of that? If you get the eyes right, but the gut wrong, it's a failure as a butterfly. If you get the wings right, and the legs right, but the muscles don't attach, that butterfly's going nowhere. It's dead. You begin to see the depths of the problem. So for evolution to have created this sort of pathway gradually, it would take a miracle.
Metamorphosis, if it came into existence at all by an undirected process, had to have done so in one fell swoop. Natural selection, by definition, I would say, cannot build that kind of process. To create a process like metamorphosis, you'd need a totally different type of cause. Something that could see a distant target, keep that target in focus, and provide all the resources necessary to hit the bullseye on the first shot. I think the only cause that could have accomplished that is an intelligent agent.
From a philosophical perspective, the suggestion of intelligent design as the explanation for the origin and development of life contradicts the assumptions of many biologists. But when considered objectively, evidence may be plentiful within the walls of a chrysalis or on a monarch's wings.
Metamorphosis not only challenges the Darwinian picture of life, in fact, it points in a positive way to the truth of intelligent design. If you saw a mechanical device of the sophistication of a butterfly, you would not for a moment hesitate to ascribe that to intelligence, because the butterfly is so much more sophisticated, almost beyond our comprehension, than anything that we make. Planning, foresight, artistry, engineering. Normally in our experience, when we see those criteria fulfilled, we see those indicators, we say that's positive evidence of intelligent design. To build a butterfly, you need a cause that can visualize a long-range objective and then direct every step of the process that's required to make it happen. Only intelligence, universally in our experience, is capable of doing that. You also need a cause that can reuse lower-level component parts to construct a different, higher-level system. For butterflies, the same genes and proteins that build you a caterpillar can be reused to give you an adult flying insect. As Nobel Prize-winning geneticist Barbara McClintock noted, it's astounding that two brilliantly designed organisms share a single genome. To build a butterfly, you have to be able to assemble a network of elaborate substructures like wings, navigational systems, and a proboscis, and then integrate all these systems into a very complex organism. And you need a cause with an artist's eye for color and pattern and shape. A sense of beauty and aesthetics that extends way beyond utilitarian purposes like camouflage or species recognition. There may well be in butterflies aspects of beauty that are there not for the sake of reproduction or survival, but for us to appreciate.
A lot of people I know who study biology do it because they find it beautiful. Natural selection has no reason to produce beauty. Beauty is a sign of the transcendent. It's purely gratuitous. We all recognize it. We just have to acknowledge what it points to.
As human beings, we have a unique gift that enables us to evaluate evidence and then arrive at logical conclusions. That's what science is all about. When you see certain effects in nature, it's your responsibility as an investigator to find the cause that will explain the effect. When you process all the evidence revealed through metamorphosis, and then you ask yourself, in your own experience, what kind of cause could bring about these results? I think the only reasonable answer is an intelligence that transcends the natural world. A designer with foresight and a sense of engineering and artistry, and the ability to light up the sky on a summer afternoon with magnificent evidence that life on Earth is the product of something greater than a blind, undirected process.